The desert didn't care about dignity. Eleanor learned that truth pressed flat against splintered wood, her dove-gray traveling dress already ruined by dust and blood that wasn't hers. The stagecoach lay on its side like a dying animal, three of its wheels still spinning uselessly in the hot Arizona wind. The driver, Thompson, she thought his name was, had stopped screaming about 10 minutes ago. She tried not to think about what that meant. "Come on out, lady." The voice drifted across the scrubland, lazy and amused. "Make this easy on yourself." Eleanor's fingers tightened around the derringer she'd pulled from her reticule. 2 shots. That's all she had. Against 5 men, maybe 6. She'd lost count when the shooting started. Her heart hammered against her ribs so hard she thought they might crack. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The advertisement had been so clear. Reputable transport service, armed escort, safe passage guaranteed to Thornton Springs. She'd paid extra for the guarantee. Another shot splintered the wood above her head, and Eleanor flinched, pressing herself smaller against the coach. The smell of gunpowder mixed with creosote and something metallic that made her stomach turn. "We got all day," another voice called out. This one sounded younger, eager. "But you don't. Sun's getting mighty hot." He wasn't wrong. Even in the shade of the wrecked coach, the heat pressed down like a physical weight. Eleanor's high collar felt like a noose. Her corset, which she'd laced properly that morning in the Tucson boarding house, now seemed designed specifically to prevent breathing. She was going to die in the middle of nowhere, trussed up like a Christmas goose, killed by men whose faces she hadn't even seen clearly. The absurdity of it hit her suddenly. After everything, after Philadelphia, after Richard, after the scandal that had driven her across half a continent, this was the end. Not even a proper ending. Just a messy, pointless death that no one back east would ever hear about. "Stubborn, ain't she?" The lazy voice again, closer now. "I respect that. I do. But it's getting tiresome." Eleanor's hand shook as she raised the derringer. The pistol was tiny in her palm, almost decorative. Her brother Thomas had given it to her before she left Philadelphia. "Just in case," he'd said, not quite meeting her eyes. He'd known what she was running from, even if they'd never spoken it aloud. She'd never fired it, not once. Hadn't even practiced. The crunch of boots on gravel, getting closer. Eleanor squeezed her eyes shut, then forced them open. If she was going to die, she'd at least die looking, not cowering. She'd done enough cowering. She raised the derringer with both hands, the way she'd seen men do it in illustrated magazines, aimed it at the corner of the coach where the sound was coming from. The outlaw came around the edge. Brown hat, sun-scorched face, teeth too white and a grin too wide. The gunshot came from the wrong direction. The outlaw's hat flew off. He stumbled backward, hand going to his head, blood already streaming between his fingers. His mouth opened in shock, then pain, then nothing as he dropped. Eleanor stared. She hadn't pulled the trigger. More gunfire erupted, sharp, controlled cracks that sounded different from the wild shooting earlier. The outlaws were yelling now, confused, angry. Horses screamed. Eleanor pressed herself against the coach, trying to make sense of the chaos. Someone new had joined the fight. Someone who knew what they were doing. "Get down!" A voice, male, young, urgent, cut through the noise. She was already down. She got downer, if that was possible, her cheek against dirt that tasted like copper. The shooting lasted maybe 2 minutes, maybe less. Time did strange things when you thought you were about to die. When it stopped, the silence felt wrong, too complete. Eleanor's ears rang. "Ma'am?" The voice again, closer. "You hit?" She didn't answer, couldn't. Her jaw had locked tight. Boots appeared in her line of vision, scuffed leather, worn at the heels. Spurs that had lost most of their shine. The boots crouched down, and a face followed, lean, weathered beyond its years, with pale eyes that seemed to catalog everything at once. Young. God, he was young. Maybe 23, 24 at most. A decade her junior, though his eyes held something that made age irrelevant. "You hurt?" he asked again. His voice had a rasp to it, like he didn't use it often. Eleanor shook her head, managed to unclench her jaw enough to speak. "No, I don't think so." "You sure? Sometimes you don't feel it right away." She took inventory. Hands, shaking but whole. Arms, same. Legs, cramped from crouching but functional. I'm sure. He nodded once, then stood, offering his hand. Eleanor stared at it, calloused, scarred across the knuckles. A working hand, nothing like Richard's soft, manicured fingers. She took it. He pulled her up with surprising gentleness, steadying her when she swayed. The world tilted slightly. She grabbed his arm, solid muscle under worn cotton, and held on until the spinning stopped. Easy, he said. Breathe. She breathed. The air tasted like dust and death. Around them, the desert stretched in every direction, indifferent to the violence that had just played out. 4 bodies lay scattered in the scrub. Eleanor looked at them, then looked away quickly. Not quickly enough. She'd already seen the stillness, the unnatural angles. The others? She heard herself ask. Ran. The young cowboy scanned the horizon, hand resting casual on the pistol at his hip. Won't get far. Horses are half dead and they're bleeding. Desert'll finish what I started. There was no satisfaction in his voice. No regret either, just fact. Eleanor's stomach lurched. She turned away from him, from the bodies, and was sickened to the dust. Violently, helplessly sick, until there was nothing left but dry heaves that made her ribs ache. When she finished, he was holding out a canteen. Rinse, he said. She did. The water was warm and tasted like metal, but it helped. Thank you, she managed. Her voice sounded strange, distant. You saved my life. He shrugged. Wrong place at the right time. A pause. Or right place at the wrong time. Depends how you look at it. He moved past her to check the overturned coach. Eleanor watched him climb over it with practiced ease, examining the damage. His movements were efficient, economical, nothing wasted. Driver's dead, he called down. Been dead a while? You were alone? Yes, her voice cracked. There was another passenger, a man traveling to Santa Fe. When they started shooting, he ran, just jumped out and ran. Smart man. They shot him anyway. I saw him fall. The cowboy, she still didn't know his name, nodded like this was expected. Yeah, they would have. He dropped back down to the ground, landing light despite the height. Coach is done. Axle's cracked, and both lead horses are dead. You got luggage? Eleanor pointed numbly at her carpet bag, which had somehow ended up wedged under the coach's rear wheel. Her trunk, the larger one with most of her possessions, was still strapped to the top of the overturned vehicle. He retrieved the carpet bag, tested its weight, then climbed back up to examine the trunk. This got anything you can't leave? Everything. The trunk held everything she owned. Books, clothes, the silver hairbrush that had been her mother's. Letters she should have burned but couldn't. Yes, she said. All of it. He looked at her for a long moment, then at his horse, a rangy buckskin standing calm despite the carnage, then back at her. She could see him doing calculations. We'll take what we can carry, he said finally. Rest stays. But, lady, I got 1 horse, 2 people. It's 20 miles to Broken Creek, and that's if we're lucky. We don't pack smart. We don't make it. His tone wasn't cruel, just pragmatic. Eleanor swallowed her protest. He was right. Of course he was right. Together they sorted through her trunk. He had opinions, firm ones, about what constituted necessary. Don't need 3 dresses, he said, setting aside her second-best day dress and the green silk she'd been saving. I'm a teacher. I need to look. You need to not die of heat stroke. He held up a simpler cotton dress, practical and light. This. Maybe 1 more. That's it. They argued about the books. She wanted all 6. He allowed 2. Pick the ones you can't replace, he said. She chose the collected Dickinson because it had been a gift from Thomas, and a worn copy of Wuthering Heights that she'd read so many times the spine had broken. Romance novel? His eyebrow quirked. It's a novel about obsession and revenge, Eleanor said coolly. The romance is secondary. If you say so. They ended up with 2 dresses, 1 pair of shoes, her sturdy walking boots, not the fine leather ones she preferred, Undergarments, this made them both uncomfortable in different ways. Her mother's hairbrush, he didn't argue about that. The 2 books, and a small leather portfolio containing her teaching credentials and letters of reference. That it? He asked. Eleanor looked at the pile of belongings they were leaving behind. Her good dresses, her hat with the peacock feather, the daguerreotype of her family, the china tea set that had survived the journey from Philadelphia. That's it, she said quietly. He tied everything into a tight bundle using rope from his saddle, then secured it behind the horse's cantle. The buckskin flicked an ear but didn't protest. You know how to ride? He asked. Side saddle, in a park, when I was 12. Right. He looked pained. Okay, new plan. You're riding in front. I'll handle the horse. In front? Unless you want to walk 20 miles in those boots. Eleanor looked down at her feet. The boots were sturdy, yes, but they'd been made for Philadelphia streets, not Arizona desert. In front is fine, she said. He mounted first, then reached down for her. Left foot in the stirrup. I'll pull. Don't think, just jump. It was graceless and awkward, and her skirts ended up hiked nearly to her knees, but somehow she landed in front of him, side saddle and precarious. His arm came around her waist, holding her steady. Comfortable? He asked. She was pressed against a stranger, in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by dead men, about to ride off into a landscape that wanted her dead. Comfortable seemed like an odd word choice. No, she said honestly. Good. Means you're paying attention. He clicked his tongue, and the horse started walking. Name's Cole, by the way. Cole Mercer. Eleanor Vance. Where were you headed, Miss Vance? Thornton Springs. I have a teaching position there. Had, he corrected. Won't make it now. Stage only runs once a month, and you missed it. Eleanor's stomach sank. There must be another way. There is. Broken Creek's got a freight wagon that runs goods to Thornton every few weeks. You might catch that, if you're lucky. And if I'm not lucky? Then you stay in Broken Creek until you can arrange something else. He paused. Fair warning, Broken Creek ain't much, mining town that's mostly mined out. Maybe 200 people on a good day. No hotel, no real law, just a marshal who drinks more than he should. Sounds charming. It ain't. They rode in silence for a while. The desert stretched around them, all scrub brush and red rock and sky so blue it hurt to look at. The sun climbed higher, and the heat pressed down like a living thing. Eleanor had never felt so far from Philadelphia in her life. Can I ask you something? She said finally. Go ahead. Those men. Did you know them? Nope. Then why did you help me? Cole was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, because nobody else was going to. It wasn't a satisfying answer. It also wasn't not true. Do you do this often? Eleanor asked. Rescue people, I mean. Often enough. His voice had gone flat. Desert's full of people who need rescuing, full of people who don't get it, too. Another silence, heavier this time. I'm sorry, Eleanor said. That was thoughtless. You didn't have to stop. You could have ridden past. Yeah, but you didn't. No, ma'am, I didn't. The horse's hooves clopped steadily against hardpan. The sun beat down. Eleanor's skin prickled under her dress, sweat gathering at her collar and beneath her arms. She'd worn her corset laced properly because that's what respectable women did. Now she regretted every decision she'd made that morning. You can take off the jacket, Cole said, as if reading her mind. I won't tell anybody. I'm fine. You're going to pass out. I said I'm fine. She felt rather than saw his shrug. Suit yourself. But when you fall off this horse, I'm leaving you where you land. He probably wasn't serious, probably. 3 miles later, Eleanor unbuttoned her jacket with shaking fingers. The relief was immediate and embarrassing. Cole said nothing, just kept the horse moving at that same steady walk. How far? She asked. 16 miles, give or take. How long? Rest of today, maybe into tonight, depending on how the horse holds up. Tonight. She'd be out here all night with a strange man. The thought should have terrified her. Maybe it did. Eleanor couldn't tell anymore. Fear had too many flavors now, and they all tasted the same. You do this a lot? Cole asked. Travel alone? First time. Brave. Desperate, Eleanor corrected. There's a difference. Not as much as you'd think. They crested a low rise, and the land opened up before them, more of the same endless scrub, broken by distant mesas that shimmered in the heat haze. Nothing moved except them and the occasional buzzard circling high overhead. It's desolate, Eleanor said. It's honest, Cole replied. Won't pretend to be something it's not. Can't say that about most places. Or most people. Or most people, he agreed. Eleanor closed her eyes against the glare. Behind her eyelids she saw the outlaw's face again. That moment of shock before he fell. She'd almost killed him herself. Would have, if Cole hadn't shot first. The thought sat heavy in her chest. Does it get easier? She asked, seeing people die. Cole's arm tightened fractionally around her waist. No. Oh. You get used to it, he added. That's different from easy. I don't want to get used to it. Then you picked the wrong direction to run, Miss Vance. He wasn't wrong. Eleanor had known the frontier would be hard. She'd read accounts, heard stories, but knowing and experiencing were different countries entirely. The sun climbed higher, the horse plodded on. Eleanor's thoughts drifted in the heat, skipping between past and present like stones across water. Richard's face, the scandal, Thomas's disappointment, the whispers that followed her through Philadelphia streets, the stagecoach tipping, Thompson's screams, the outlaw's grin, Cole's hand pulling her up from the dirt. You running from something? Cole asked suddenly. Eleanor stiffened. What makes you say that? You got that look, like you're trying to leave something behind, but it keeps catching up. That's presumptuous. That's a yes. Eleanor bit back her first response. Her second. Finally, aren't we all running from something? Fair enough. He adjusted their position slightly, easing the horse around a cluster of rocks. You running from the law? No. A man? Eleanor's jaw tightened. That's none of your business. You're right. It ain't. A pause. But we got about 12 more hours together, and silence gets heavy, just making conversation. Let's talk about you instead, Eleanor said. What's your story, Mr. Mercer? What brings you out here? Work. What kind of work? Whatever pays. That's not an answer. Sure it is. Just not the one you wanted. They fell back into silence, but it felt different now. Less empty. More deliberate. Around midday, Cole stopped the horse near a scraggly mesquite tree, the only shade visible in any direction. He dismounted first, then helped Eleanor down. Her legs nearly buckled when her feet hit the ground. Sit, he said, pointing to the tree's sparse shadow. Drink. He handed her the canteen. She drank carefully, rationing the water even though her throat screamed for more. When she tried to hand it back, he shook his head. Keep going. You're dehydrated. So are you. I'm used to it. While she drank, Cole checked the horse's hooves, examined its legs, adjusted the saddle. His movements had that same efficient quality, no wasted motion, every action purposeful. How old are you? Eleanor asked, then immediately regretted it. I'm sorry, that was rude. 24, Cole said without looking up. You? Honesty or vanity? Eleanor chose honesty, barely. 35. If the age difference bothered him, it didn't show. He just nodded, running his hand along the horse's flank. You seem older. I'll choose to take that as a compliment. Wasn't meant as one or the other, just an observation. He straightened, squinting at the sun. You carry yourself like someone who's been through things. Makes you seem older than you are. Eleanor didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. They rested for maybe 20 minutes, long enough for the horse to cool, not long enough for the heat to overwhelm them entirely. Then they were moving again, Eleanor back in her awkward side saddle position, Cole's arm steady around her waist. The afternoon stretched long and brutal. The sun seemed to hang motionless in the sky, pinning them under its weight. Eleanor's lips cracked. Her skin burned despite her dress covering most of it. She'd lost her hat in the stagecoach attack, and now regretted not asking Cole if they could retrieve it. "Tell me about Broken Creek," she said, partly to distract herself from the heat, partly because the silence had started to feel oppressive. "Not much to tell. Mining town, like I said. Copper, mostly. Had a boom about 5 years back. Now it's dying slow." "Why do you stay?" "Who said I stay? I drift. Broken Creek's just where I happen to be at the moment. And before that? Other places." He shifted slightly behind her. "Tucson for a while. Santa Fe before that. Dodge City before that. You get the pattern." "No roots," Eleanor said. "Roots are for trees. I'm not a tree." "What are you then?" "Tired," Cole said. "Mostly just tired." There was something in his voice that made Eleanor look back at him, or try to. She couldn't see much from her position, just the line of his jaw and the brim of his hat. "You're too young to be tired," she said. "Tell that to the years." They rode on. The landscape barely changed. Same scrub, same rocks, same endless sky. Eleanor found herself drifting, half asleep in the heat, jerking awake whenever the horse stumbled or Cole shifted. "Stay with me," he said during one of these jerks. "If you fall asleep and fall off, I'm serious about leaving you." "Liar." "What makes you so sure?" "You came back for me at the stagecoach. You'll come back if I fall." "Maybe I'm learning from my mistakes." But his arm tightened around her waist, holding her more securely. Eleanor allowed herself the smallest smile. By late afternoon, the terrain began to change subtly. More rocks, steeper inclines, signs of water, dried stream beds mostly, but Cole seemed encouraged. "Getting close," he said. "Another few miles." "You can tell?" "Been this way before." As the sun finally began its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that would have been beautiful if Eleanor hadn't been so exhausted, they crested a ridge. Below them, nestled in a shallow valley, lay Broken Creek. Cole hadn't lied. It wasn't much. Maybe 20 buildings total, most of them weathered wood that had gone gray in the sun. A single main street, unpaved and rutted. A few scattered houses. What might have been a church, though the cross on top sat crooked. Smoke rose from a couple of chimneys, and Eleanor could see figures moving between buildings, small as insects from this distance. "There she is," Cole said. "Paradise." "You have a strange definition of paradise." "You'd prefer the desert?" "I'd prefer Philadelphia." "Then you should have stayed there." They descended the ridge carefully, the horse picking its way over loose rock. As they got closer, Eleanor could make out more details. A general store. A saloon. Of course there was a saloon. A building with Marshall painted on it in faded letters. What might have been a boarding house. People noticed them coming. A few stopped to watch. Cole raised his hand in greeting to a man standing outside the saloon. The man didn't wave back, just stared. "Friendly town," Eleanor murmured. "They'll warm up once they figure out you're not a threat." "How long does that usually take?" "Depends on the town. Here? Couple months, maybe." They rode straight up the main street. Eleanor felt eyes on her from every direction. She tried to sit straighter, to look composed, but it was hard to look composed when you were covered in dust and sweat, perched sideways on a horse, held in place by a strange man's arm. Cole stopped in front of the building that might have been a boarding house. It had a sign, at least. Rooms. "Mrs. Chen runs this place," he said, dismounting. "She's all right. Won't gouge you too bad on the price." He helped Eleanor down. Her legs trembled, but held, barely. "Thank you," she said, suddenly formal. "For everything. I don't know how to repay you." "Don't need repaying. Just stay alive. That'll be payment enough." He untied her bundled belongings from the saddle and handed them to her. Their fingers brushed, brief contact, but Eleanor felt it like a spark. "What will you do?" she asked. "What I always do. Find work. Move on eventually." "Will I see you again?" Cole looked at her, those pale eyes unreadable. "It's a small town, Miss Vance. You'll see everybody again." He touched the brim of his hat, some gesture halfway between courtesy and dismissal, then swung back onto his horse. Eleanor watched him ride away, disappearing around a corner, leaving her standing alone on a dusty street in a dying town. The door behind her opened. "You coming in? Or are you planning to grow roots out here? A woman's voice, sharp but not unkind. Accented. Chinese, Eleanor thought. She turned to find a small, sturdy woman in her 50s watching her from the doorway. Mrs. Chen, presumably. I need a room, Eleanor said. I don't know for how long. Mrs. Chen's gaze flicked over her, taking in the ruined dress, the dusty face, the carpetbag clutched in white-knuckled hands. You got money? Yes? Then you got a room. Come on. Eleanor followed her inside into the dim coolness of the boarding house. She didn't look back at the street, didn't watch to see if Cole might return. She just walked forward, because that was all she knew how to do anymore. Keep walking. Keep moving. Keep running from whatever was chasing her, even when she wasn't sure anymore what that was. The room was small and spare. A bed frame with a thin mattress, a washstand with a chipped basin, a single window that looked out onto the alley behind the boarding house. Eleanor set her carpetbag on the floor and sat on the bed. The frame creaked ominously. Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway with a pitcher of water and a threadbare towel. 50 cents a night. $1 if you want meals. Pay weekly and I'll knock off $2. Eleanor did the math quickly. Her savings wouldn't last long at that rate. I'll pay for 3 nights. See where I stand after that. Fair enough. Mrs. Chen set the pitcher down. Outhouse is out back. You break something, you pay for it. No men in the rooms, no cooking in the rooms. Breakfast is at 6, supper at 7. You miss it. You go hungry. Understood. Mrs. Chen's expression softened slightly. You look half dead. Get some rest. We can talk about the rest tomorrow. When she left, Eleanor poured water into the basin and stared at her reflection in the small mirror above it. She barely recognized herself. Her hair had come loose from its pins, hanging in damp strands around her face. Dust caked her skin. Her eyes looked hollow. She washed as best she could, stripped down to her chemise, and lay on the bed without bothering to turn down the covers. Sleep took her before the sun had fully set. She dreamed of the stagecoach, of Thompson's screams, of the outlaw's grin transforming into Richard's face. She woke gasping in the dark, disoriented, reaching for a lamp that wasn't there. It took several minutes to remember where she was. Broken Creek, Arizona Territory. 1,000 miles from everything she'd known. Eleanor lay awake until dawn, listening to unfamiliar sounds through the thin walls. Voices in Spanish, someone coughing wetly in the next room, horses in the street. Somewhere, a baby crying. When gray light finally leaked through the window, she rose and dressed in the clean cotton dress Cole had insisted she pack. It felt strange not wearing her corset properly, but the thought of lacing herself into that torture device made her ribs ache and remembered pain. The dining room downstairs held 3 long tables and smelled like coffee and bacon grease. A handful of people were already eating, mostly men, rough-looking and weathered. They glanced up when Eleanor entered and conversation stuttered. Mrs. Chen emerged from the kitchen with a pot of coffee. Sit anywhere. Breakfast is cornmeal mush, bacon if you're lucky. Eleanor chose a seat at the end of one table, away from the other boarders. Mrs. Chen poured her coffee without asking, then disappeared back into the kitchen. The coffee was strong enough to strip paint. Eleanor drank it anyway. A man across the table cleared his throat. You the one came in with Cole yesterday? Eleanor looked up. The man was perhaps 40, with a beard that had gone more gray than brown and eyes that held more curiosity than threat. Yes, she said. Thought so. News travels. He stuck out his hand. Jim Holloway. I run the assay office. What's left of it? Eleanor shook his hand, aware of the other diners watching. Eleanor Vance. What brings you to Broken Creek, Miss Vance? Misfortune, mostly. She took another sip of coffee. I was traveling to Thornton Springs for a teaching position. The stagecoach was attacked. Murmurs around the table. A woman at the far end, hard-faced, with blonde hair going gray, leaned forward. Attacked? By who? Outlaws, 5 or 6 of them. Mr. Mercer intervened. 5 or 6, the woman repeated. And Cole took them on alone? Yes. Fool kid, but there was something like affection in her voice. That sounds like him. You know him? Eleanor asked. Everyone knows Cole. He drifts through every few months, does odd jobs. Stays out of trouble, mostly. The woman stuck out her hand. Sarah Mitchell. I run the saloon. Eleanor shook it, surprised. In Philadelphia, no respectable woman would admit to running a saloon, let alone introduce herself as such. Sarah seemed to read her thoughts. Out here, respectability means staying alive. Everything else is decoration. She pushed a plate of bacon toward Eleanor. Eat. You look like you need it. The bacon was oversalted and slightly burnt. Eleanor had never tasted anything better. So you're a teacher, Jim said. We don't get many of those out here. I was supposed to be. Now I'm just stranded. Thornton Springs, Sarah mused. That's what, 40 miles north? You could still get there. Wait for the freight wagon, like Cole probably told you. How long does that take? Week, maybe 2. Depends on if Carlson's feeling ambitious or drunk. Sarah bit into her own bacon. Of course, you could always stay here instead. Eleanor looked around the dining room at the peeling wallpaper and water-stained ceiling. Here? Town needs a teacher. Had one briefly, couple years back. She lasted 3 months before she married some miner and moved to California. Sarah's gaze was sharp. You planning on marrying a miner, Miss Vance? No. Then you'd last longer than she did. I don't think... Pay's not great, Jim interrupted. Town can't afford much, but there's maybe 15, 20 kids who could use learning. Right now they're running wild or working claims with their fathers. Neither one's doing them any favors. Eleanor set down her coffee. I appreciate the offer, but I have a contract in Thornton Springs. Do you? Sarah raised an eyebrow. You got a letter? Something signed? Eleanor hesitated. The truth was she had a verbal agreement made through correspondence. Nothing formal, nothing binding. I gave my word, she said finally. Your word to people who don't know if you're alive or dead. That stage was supposed to arrive 2 days ago. They've probably already started looking for a replacement. The thought hadn't occurred to Eleanor, but Sarah was right. If the stage didn't arrive, and it wouldn't, not with Thompson dead and the coach destroyed, Thornton Springs would assume the worst. I need to send a telegram, Eleanor said. Let them know I'm alive. No telegraph office, Jim said apologetically. Used to have one, but the company pulled out when the mine started failing. Nearest one's in Tucson. That's 2 days' ride, Sarah added. Minimum. By the time you get there and back, the freight wagon will have already run. You'll have missed your chance either way. Eleanor pressed her fingers to her temples. A headache was building behind her eyes. This is absurd. This is the frontier, Sarah corrected. Absurd is standard. After breakfast, Eleanor walked through Broken Creek with no particular destination in mind. She needed to move, to think, to make sense of what was happening. The town looked worse in daylight. Half the buildings stood empty, windows broken or boarded over. The mine entrance, a dark wound in the hillside north of town, showed no signs of activity. Rusted equipment lay abandoned near the entrance. She passed the general store, the saloon, the marshal's office. A handful of people moved through the street, but there was no real energy to it, no sense of purpose. Broken Creek wasn't dying quickly. It was dying the slow death of a place that had outlived its reason for existing. Near the edge of town, Eleanor found what might have once been a schoolhouse. The building was small, barely more than a shed, with a collapsed roof on one side and a door hanging crooked on its hinges. She pushed the door open carefully. Inside, debris covered the floor. Broken furniture, bird droppings, leaves blown in through the damaged roof. But she could see the bones of it. Benches where students had sat. A desk at the front, rotted through but recognizable. Slate boards leaning against the wall. Someone had tried to build something here. Someone had cared. Thinking about it? Eleanor spun. Cole stood in the doorway, backlit by morning sun. She hadn't heard him approach. Thinking about what? She asked. Teaching. Here. He stepped inside, examining the damage with a practiced eye. Sarah got to you already, didn't she? How did you know? Because that's what Sarah does. She sees something useful and she grabs it. He kicked at a piece of broken bench. Not saying she's wrong. Town could use a teacher. The building needs work. Building needs to be torn down and rebuilt from scratch, Cole corrected. But that's doable. Lumber's cheap, labor's cheaper. You could have a schoolhouse in a week if people put their minds to it. I have a position in Thornton Springs. Do you? Eleanor crossed her arms. Why does everyone keep asking me that? Because you're not sure yourself. Cole moved to the front of the room, standing where a teacher would stand. If you were sure, you wouldn't be here looking at this place. He wasn't wrong, and Eleanor hated that he wasn't wrong. I don't make impulsive decisions, she said. You ran halfway across the country. That seems pretty impulsive. That was different. Was it? Eleanor's jaw tightened. You don't know anything about me. I know you're running from something. I know you ended up in the middle of the desert with outlaws trying to kill you. I know you didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't fall apart. Cole's pale eyes held hers. Most people would have fallen apart. Maybe I'm just good at hiding it. Maybe. Or maybe you're tougher than you think you are. The compliment, if that's what it was, sat awkwardly between them. Eleanor looked away first. Why do you care? She asked. Whether I stay or go? Cole shrugged. Don't particularly, but I brought you here, so I feel somewhat responsible. Rather you made a choice than just drifted into something because you were too tired to fight it. I'm not drifting. Then prove it. Make a decision. Stay or go, but decide. He left before she could respond, his footsteps fading in the dirt street outside. Eleanor stood alone in the ruined schoolhouse, anger and frustration warring in her chest. Who was Cole Mercer to tell her what to do? He was a drifter, a gun for hire, barely more than a boy. What did he know about teaching, about responsibility, about building something that lasted? But standing there in the wreckage, Eleanor could almost see it, could see the room rebuilt, cleaned, filled with children, could see herself at that rotted desk, teaching grammar and arithmetic and geography to kids who'd probably never seen a proper school. It was absurd. She was a Philadelphia schoolteacher with credentials and references. She'd taught at a respectable girls' academy before the scandal. She'd been planning to teach in Thornton Springs, a real town with a real school board and a real salary. Broken Creek was none of those things. But Thornton Springs didn't know if she was alive or dead, and even if they did, there was no guarantee they'd hold the position. Sarah was right about that. Eleanor closed her eyes, took a breath, made a choice. She found Sarah at the saloon, inventorying bottles behind the bar. I'll stay, Eleanor said. Temporarily. Until I can arrange proper transport to Thornton Springs. Sarah set down the bottles she was holding. Define temporarily. A month, maybe 2. Long enough to get the children started on basic lessons. Long enough to see if this place deserves a permanent teacher. And if it does, then I'll write to Thornton Springs and decline their offer. Properly. Eleanor lifted her chin. I don't abandon commitments, Miss Mitchell. I fulfill them or I end them cleanly. Fair enough. Sarah stuck out her hand. Welcome to Broken Creek, Miss Vance. Try not to let it kill you. The next week passed in a blur of activity that left Eleanor exhausted and oddly satisfied. Word spread quickly that the new teacher was staying, and people responded with surprising enthusiasm. Jim Holloway organized a crew to rebuild the schoolhouse. Men appeared with lumber and hammers, miners with nothing to mine, drifters looking for day work, fathers who wanted better for their children. They tore down what couldn't be saved and built new walls in its place. Cole worked alongside them, though he never stayed long. He'd appear in the morning, spend a few hours hammering or sawing, then disappear for the rest of the day. Eleanor tried not to watch him, tried not to notice the easy way he moved, the quiet competence of his work. She failed at not noticing. He's a good man, Sarah said one afternoon, catching Eleanor's gaze following Cole across the construction site. I'm sure he is. But young, Eleanor's cheeks heated. I don't. Relax. I'm just making an observation. Sarah handed Eleanor a broom. Though, if you were looking, you could do worse. Cole's got his demons, but he's decent where it counts. I'm not looking. Right, and I'm not nosy. Sarah grinned. We all have our little fictions. Eleanor swept the floor harder than necessary, ignoring Sarah's laugh. By the end of the week, the schoolhouse stood complete. It wasn't beautiful. Rough lumber walls, a simple shingled roof, benches cobbled together from salvaged wood, but it was solid, functional, a place where learning could happen. Eleanor stood in the doorway on Sunday evening, watching the last light slant through the windows. Tomorrow she'd start teaching. Tomorrow she'd stand at that desk and try to shape young minds with nothing but chalk and determination. The thought terrified her. Looks good. Cole again. Eleanor was starting to recognize his approach. Quiet, careful, like he was always half expecting trouble. It does, she agreed. Thank you for helping build it. Wasn't just me. No, but you were here every day. Cole shifted his weight, uncomfortable with the gratitude. Didn't have anything better to do. They stood in silence, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of amber and rose. Can I ask you something? Eleanor said. Sure. Why do you drift? You're skilled. You could settle somewhere. Build something permanent. Could, Cole acknowledged. Don't want to. Why not? He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, because permanent things can be taken away. Better not to have them in the first place. There was a story there. Eleanor wanted to ask, but something in his posture warned her off. That's a lonely way to live, she said instead. Maybe, but it's safe. Safe from what? Cole looked at her then, really looked at her, and Eleanor saw something raw in his expression. From caring about things that won't last anyway. Before she could respond, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the gathering dark. Eleanor stood alone in the doorway of her new school, watching the stars emerge one by one in the vast Arizona sky. She thought about permanence and safety, about choices made and choices avoided. She thought about Philadelphia, about the life she'd left behind, and she realized with a start that she hadn't thought about Richard in days. Monday morning arrived too quickly. Eleanor woke before dawn, her stomach churning with nerves. She dressed carefully in her better cotton dress, pinned her hair with precision, and tried to calm the trembling in her hands. 15 children. Sarah had said 15, maybe 20. Eleanor had taught classes of 30 in Philadelphia. This should be nothing. But those students had been prepared. They'd had books and supplies and parents who valued education. What would she find here? She arrived at the schoolhouse just after sunrise to find she wasn't the first. A girl of perhaps 13 sat on the steps, arms wrapped around her knees. She stood when Eleanor approached. "Morning, ma'am. I'm Lucy Patterson." Her accent was pure frontier, clipped consonants, flattened vowels. "My pa said I should come early, help you get set up." Eleanor felt something unclench in her chest. "Thank you, Lucy. That's very kind." Together they arranged the benches, set out the few slates and pieces of chalk Eleanor had scrounged from the general store, and swept the floor one last time. By 8 o'clock, children began arriving. They came in clusters, siblings holding hands, older children dragging younger ones. Some walked confidently, others hung back shy. Eleanor counted them as they entered. 12, 15, 18. A boy of maybe 7 appeared in the doorway, dirt-smudged and wild-haired, and announced, "Pa says I don't gotta learn nothing if I don't want to." "Anything," Eleanor corrected automatically. "You don't have to learn anything, and your father is correct. Education is a choice." The boy blinked, surprised. "Really?" "Really. You're welcome to stay or go, but if you stay, you follow my rules." He stayed. By 8:30, Eleanor stood before 23 children ranging from perhaps 6 to 15 years old. Most had never attended school, some could barely write their names. A few, like Lucy, showed signs of previous education. Eleanor took a breath, began. "Good morning. My name is Miss Vance. I'll be your teacher." The first day was chaos. The children had no concept of classroom behavior. They talked over each other, left their seats without asking, fought over the limited supplies. One boy threw chalk at another. 2 girls dissolved into tears over a broken slate. Eleanor wanted to scream, wanted to walk out, wanted to explain that she'd taught refined young ladies who knew how to sit still and take notes, not wild frontier children who barely understood the concept of quiet. Instead, she adapted. She abandoned her lesson plan, spent the morning just learning names, assessing abilities, found that Tommy, the chalk thrower, could do arithmetic in his head faster than she could write it on the board, discovered that quiet Maria in the back row spoke 3 languages but couldn't read in any of them, learned that siblings Ben and Annie had lost their mother last winter and their father was drinking himself to death in the mine. By midday, Eleanor's head pounded and her voice had gone hoarse. She dismissed the children early, telling them to come back tomorrow. Lucy lingered after the others left. It gets easier, she said, or so I heard. From whom? The last teacher, Miss Abrams. She said the first week was hell, but then they started learning. Lucy picked up discarded chalk, arranged it neatly on the desk. Of course, then she met Mr. Garrett and moved to California, so maybe it doesn't get that much easier. Eleanor laughed despite herself. Thank you for the encouragement. You did good today, Miss Vance. Better than you think. Lucy headed for the door, then paused. Oh, Cole asked me to tell you he'll stop by later. Something about supplies. She left before Eleanor could ask what supplies. Cole appeared just before sunset carrying a crate. He set it on her desk without ceremony. What's this? Eleanor asked. Books, McGuffey readers mostly. Found them at the general store gathering dust. Owner said you could have them for cost. Eleanor opened the crate. 8 books, worn but serviceable. It was more than she'd hoped for. How much do I owe you? Nothing. Town's paying for them. The town doesn't have any money. The town has enough for this. Cole leaned against the doorframe watching her. How was the first day? Terrible. That bad? Worse. Eleanor sank into the chair behind her desk. They're so far behind. Some of them can barely read and they're completely undisciplined. I don't know if I can do this. You can. You don't know that. I do. Cole's voice was quiet but certain. You stood up to outlaws. You crossed the desert. You chose to stay when you could have run. You're tougher than bad students, Miss Vance. Eleanor wanted to argue, but exhaustion won. Maybe. Definitely. He pushed off the doorframe. Give it a week. If you still hate it after a week, I'll help you get to Thornton Springs myself. Promise? Promise. He left, and Eleanor sat alone in the fading light, surrounded by crude benches and borrowed books. She thought about Philadelphia, about her old classroom with its polished floors and orderly students. She thought about the look on Tommy's face when he'd solved that arithmetic problem. The way Maria's eyes had lit up when Eleanor spoke to her in Spanish. How Annie had gripped her brother's hand the entire lesson, like she was afraid he'd disappear. Maybe Cole was right. Maybe she could do this. Or maybe she'd fail spectacularly and end up exactly where she'd started, running from something she couldn't fix. Only one way to find out. The week passed, then another, and Eleanor didn't ask Cole to take her to Thornton Springs. The children improved slowly, grudgingly, in fits and starts that left her frustrated and occasionally triumphant. Tommy stopped throwing chalk but developed a habit of correcting her arithmetic, often accurately, which made it worse. Maria began reading haltingly in English, her finger tracing each word like it might disappear. Ben showed up drunk one morning, 14 years old and reeking of whiskey, and Eleanor sent him home with instructions not to return until he was sober. He came back the next day, shamefaced and shaking, and didn't miss another lesson. The town began to feel less like a temporary stopping point and more like a place she might actually be. Mrs. Chen started leaving extra biscuits at breakfast. Jim Holloway brought her a proper desk chair he'd found in an abandoned mine office. Sarah dropped off a bottle of whiskey one evening with the comment, "For the hard days?" And they're all hard days. Eleanor kept the bottle in her room, unopened. She wasn't sure if that made her strong or just stubborn. Cole continued to drift in and out of town. Sometimes she'd see him for days in a row, helping repair a collapsed mine shaft, breaking horses for a rancher 10 miles out, playing cards at Sarah's saloon. Other times, he'd vanish for a week or more, and Eleanor would catch herself scanning the street for his buckskin horse, annoyed at her own concern. She told herself it was simple gratitude. He'd saved her life. Of course she'd notice his absence. She was lying, and she knew it. It was a Thursday afternoon in her 5th week when things shifted. Eleanor had dismissed the children early. Heat and short tempers made learning impossible, and was erasing the chalkboard when she heard raised voices outside. She stepped into the doorway to find Cole facing down 3 men she didn't recognize. They were rough-looking, armed, the kind of men who carried violence like other people carried pocket watches. "I'm just saying, Mercer, you cost us a good payday." The speaker was tall, with a scar running from his ear to his jaw. That schoolteacher was supposed to die with the rest of them. Eleanor's blood went cold. Cole's hand rested easy on his pistol grip, but his voice had gone flat and dangerous. Then you should have done the job right the first time. We would have if you hadn't interfered. The scarred man spat into the dirt. Now the boss is asking questions, wants to know why witnesses are still breathing. Tell your boss to ask me himself. He might just do that. The three men moved off, but not before the scarred one locked eyes with Eleanor. His smile made her skin crawl. Cole waited until they disappeared around a corner before turning to her. Go inside. Who were they? Nobody you need to know about. Go inside, Eleanor. It was the first time he'd used her given name. The intimacy of it startled her almost as much as the fear in his eyes. They were talking about the stagecoach, she said. About killing me. I said go inside. Don't give me orders, Mr. Mercer. I'm not one of your horses. Something flickered across his face. Anger, maybe, or frustration. Fine, stand here. Make yourself a target. See if I care. He stalked off before she could respond, leaving Eleanor alone in the street with a dozen new questions and the sick certainty that the attack on the stagecoach hadn't been random at all. That night, Sarah found Eleanor sitting on the boarding house steps, watching the stars. Cole told me what happened, Sarah said, settling beside her. The men who threatened you. He said it was nothing. Cole says a lot of things. Doesn't make them true. Sarah pulled out a cigarette, lit it, offered one to Eleanor. Eleanor surprised herself by accepting. I've never smoked, she said. Good time to start? Sarah showed her how to hold it, how to draw without coughing. Those men work for someone named Dalton. Runs an operation out of Tucson. Robberies mostly, sometimes worse. Why would someone like that want me dead? You were on that stagecoach. Maybe you saw something you weren't supposed to see. Maybe you're just loose ends. Sarah exhaled smoke into the night air. Either way, they're not going to forget about you. Eleanor's hand shook slightly. She set the cigarette down. What should I do? Stay alert. Don't go anywhere alone. And trust Cole. Sarah's voice softened. I know he's young and rough around the edges, but that boy knows how to handle trouble. He'll keep you safe if you let him. I barely know him. You know him well enough. I've seen how you look at each other. I haven't, Eleanor stammered, heat rising to her face. It's not like that. Sure it isn't. Sarah stood, grinding out her cigarette under her heel. Just don't be stupid about it. Out here we don't have the luxury of being proper. Life's too short and too hard for that nonsense. She left Eleanor alone with her thoughts and the cooling desert night. The threats escalated slowly. A week after the confrontation, Eleanor found her classroom window broken, a rock sitting among the glass shards. No note, no message, just destruction. Cole appeared within an hour of her discovering it, like he'd been watching. Maybe he had been. Pack some things, he said. You're moving. I have a room at Mrs. Chen's. Had a room. Now you're staying at Sarah's. She's got space above the saloon, and there's always people around. Safer. I don't need you making decisions for me. Cole's jaw tightened. Those men aren't playing games, Eleanor. They broke your window today. Tomorrow it might be worse. Let me keep you safe. Why? The question burst out of her, sharp and frustrated. Why do you care so much? You don't even know me. Oh, I know enough. That's not an answer. Cole looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his pale eyes. Because I brought you here. Because if something happens to you, that's on me. And because... He stopped, shook his head. Just trust me, please. The please did it. Cole didn't strike her as someone who said please often. Eleanor moved into Sarah's spare room that afternoon. It was smaller than Mrs. Chen's, with a window that overlooked the main street and the constant noise of the saloon below. But Sarah was right. There were always people around, always witnesses. It should have made her feel safer. Instead, she felt trapped. The children noticed the change in her. Lucy asked if she was sick. Tommy asked if she was scared. Eleanor lied to both of them, but Tommy didn't believe her. He was too smart for his own good, that boy. My pa says there's men looking for you, he said after class one day. Says they're bad men. Your father is right, but you don't need to worry about it. I'm not worried. Tommy kicked at the floor. I just thought you should know. If you need help, my pa's got a shotgun. So does Mr. Holloway. So does pretty much everyone. Eleanor's throat tightened. "Thank you, Tommy. That's very kind." "We don't want you to leave," he said quietly. "You're the best teacher we ever had." "I'm the only teacher you've ever had. Still the best." After he left, Eleanor sat at her desk and cried for the first time since arriving in Broken Creek. Not from fear, though there was plenty of that. From something else, something that felt dangerously like belonging. Cole started appearing at the schoolhouse every afternoon, timing his arrival to match the end of lessons. He'd lean against the wall while Eleanor tidied up, not speaking, just present. The children took to him immediately, bombarding him with questions about his horse, his gun, whether he'd ever shot anyone. "That's not appropriate conversation," Eleanor said sharply when Ben asked how many men Cole had killed. "It's all right," Cole said. "They're curious." He looked at Ben. "I don't talk about things like that. Some questions don't have good answers." Ben nodded, satisfied in the way children were when adults treated them seriously. After the children left, Cole walked Eleanor back to the saloon. It became routine, this silent escort through streets that felt less safe every day. "You don't have to do this," Eleanor said one evening. "I know." "Then why?" "Because I want to." It wasn't much of an answer, but it was honest. Eleanor had learned to value Cole's honesty, even when it frustrated her. They were halfway to the saloon when 3 men stepped out of an alley. Not the same 3 from before, but cut from the same cloth. Dangerous, armed, looking for trouble. Cole's hand moved to his pistol before Eleanor even registered the threat. "Easy," the lead man said. He was older than the others, with a silver beard and cold eyes. "Just want to talk." "Talk from over there, then," Cole said. "It's about the lady. Dalton wants to see her." "Not interested." "Wasn't asking you, boy." The man's gaze shifted to Eleanor. "You come with us peaceful. Nobody gets hurt. You make this difficult. Well, can't promise what happens then." Eleanor's heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady. "I don't know anyone named Dalton, and I have nothing to say to him." "You were on that stagecoach. You saw what happened. Dalton needs to know what you saw." "She didn't see anything," Cole said. "She was hiding behind the coach the whole time." "That true?" The man tilted his head at Eleanor. It was true. Mostly. She'd seen men shooting, heard screaming, but she couldn't identify anyone. Hadn't even gotten a clear look at most of the attackers. "It's true," she said. "I saw nothing useful." "Then you won't mind telling Dalton yourself." "She's not going anywhere with you." Cole's voice had gone deadly quiet. "Leave. Now. While you still can." The silver-bearded man smiled. "3 of us. 1 of you. I like those odds." "Then you're dumber than you look." It happened fast. The man reached for his gun. Cole drew faster, impossibly fast, and fired once. The bullet took the man in the shoulder, spinning him around. The other 2 froze. "Next one goes in his head," Cole said. "After that, you 2. Your choice." They chose to leave, dragging their wounded companion with them. Cole didn't holster his gun until they'd disappeared. Then he turned to Eleanor and she saw something raw in his face. Fear, anger, something else she couldn't name. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I should be asking you that. You just shot someone." "He was going to shoot first. I just beat him to it." Eleanor's hands were shaking. She clasped them together, trying to hide it. "This is because of me. You're in danger because of me." "I'm always in danger. That's just life out here." Cole finally holstered his gun. "Come on, let's get you inside." But Eleanor didn't move. "Why are you doing this? Really? Don't give me that nonsense about bringing me here or feeling responsible. Tell me the truth." Cole looked at her, and for once his guard was down. "Because when I pulled you out of that dirt, you looked at me like I was someone worth knowing, not just some drifter, not just a gun, someone who mattered." He swallowed hard. "Nobody's looked at me like that in a long time." The confession hung between them, vulnerable and raw. Eleanor wanted to say something, but the words tangled in her throat. Cole cleared his throat, stepping back. "We should go." They walked to the saloon in silence, but it felt different now. Heavier. Weighted with things unsaid. That night, Eleanor lay awake in her room above the saloon, listening to piano music and laughter drift up through the floorboards. She thought about Cole's words. About the way he'd looked at her, about the fact that she was 35 years old and feeling things she hadn't felt since she was young and stupid and believed in love. This was dangerous. Not the men threatening her, though that was dangerous too, but this. Whatever was building between her and a 24-year-old cowboy who lived out of saddlebags and probably wouldn't stay in Broken Creek much longer. She should stop it, should pull back, maintain distance, remember that she was a teacher with responsibilities and a reputation to protect. But when she closed her eyes, all she saw was Cole standing in that street, gun drawn, willing to fight 3 men to keep her safe. The next morning, Eleanor found a letter slipped under her door. The handwriting was rough but legible. Miss Vance, you are in danger you don't understand. Dalton won't stop. Leave Broken Creek while you still can. This is not your fight. No signature. But Eleanor knew who'd written it. She found Cole at the livery stable, checking his horse's shoes. He looked up when she approached, and his expression told her he knew what she was going to say. I'm not leaving, Eleanor said, holding up the letter. You should. I have students who need me, a school I helped build, people I care about. You'll be dead if you stay. Then I'll be dead. But I won't run anymore. Eleanor's voice shook, but she forced the words out anyway. I spent a year running from Philadelphia, running from shame and scandal and a man who made me feel small. I'm done running, Cole. This is where I stand. Cole's jaw worked. You're being stubborn. I'm being honest. There's a difference. Honest gets you killed out here. Then you'll have to keep me alive. Something shifted in Cole's expression. You're asking a lot. I know. I might fail. You might, but I trust you anyway. The words came out before Eleanor could stop them, and she saw them land, saw Cole's face do something complicated and painful and almost hopeful. You shouldn't, he said quietly. Too late. They stood in the stable, dust motes drifting through shafts of morning light, and Eleanor realized they'd crossed some invisible line. There was no going back now. Whatever happened next, with Dalton's men, with the town, with each other, they were in it together. Cole reached out, hesitated, then tucked a loose strand of hair behind Eleanor's ear. The gesture was achingly gentle, at odds with the violence he was capable of. You're going to be the death of me, he said. Likewise. His hand lingered near her face, and for a moment Eleanor thought he might kiss her. Part of her wanted him to. Part of her was terrified of what that would mean. But Cole dropped his hand and stepped back. I need to ride out. Talk to some people. See if I can figure out what Dalton's really after. How long will you be gone? Few days, maybe a week. He hesitated. Sarah's got a shotgun under the bar. She knows how to use it. Stay close to her. Don't go anywhere alone. And if those men come back, I'll scream loud enough to wake the dead. I'm serious, Eleanor. So am I. She met his gaze. Be careful out there. Always am. He left that afternoon, and Broken Creek felt emptier without him. Eleanor threw herself into teaching with renewed focus, drilling the children on reading and arithmetic until they groaned. She stayed late at the schoolhouse, grading papers by lamplight, then walked quickly to the saloon with Sarah's pistol tucked in her pocket. A loan she'd accepted reluctantly but carried religiously. The town watched and waited. Jim Holloway made a point of walking past the school twice a day. Mrs. Chen appeared with baskets of food Eleanor hadn't ordered. Even Marshal Hastings, drunk more often than not, managed to patrol the streets with something approaching vigilance. Broken Creek was protecting her. The realization made Eleanor's chest tight. On the 4th day of Cole's absence, a freight wagon rolled into town. Eleanor heard about it from Lucy, who burst into the schoolhouse breathless and excited. Miss Vance! There's a wagon heading to Thornton Springs tomorrow. The driver says he's got room if you want passage. Eleanor's hand stilled on the chalk she'd been holding. Tomorrow? First light. Mr. Carlson, that's the driver, says it's the last run before winter. If you're going, it has to be now. This was it. The moment she'd been waiting for. The escape route that would take her to the respectable teaching position in the real town with the proper school. Everything she'd planned before the stagecoach attack, before Cole, before Broken Creek wormed its way into her carefully constructed defenses. Thank you for telling me, Lucy, Eleanor managed. After the children left, she sat at her desk and stared at the rough walls she'd helped rebuild. Thought about Tommy's quick mind and Maria's halting English and Ben showing up sober every single day for 3 weeks now. Thought about Sarah's fierce loyalty and Jim's quiet kindness and Mrs. Chen's extra biscuits. Thought about Cole, somewhere out in the desert, risking himself to keep her safe. The smart choice was obvious. Take the wagon. Go to Thornton Springs. Leave the danger and complications behind. Build the life she'd planned. Safe, respectable, predictable. The smart choice felt like dying. Eleanor pulled out a piece of paper and began to write. Not to Thornton Springs, that letter could wait. This one was more important. She wrote to her brother Thomas in Philadelphia, told him about Broken Creek, about the children, about finding something she hadn't known she was looking for. She didn't mention Cole specifically, but Thomas would read between the lines. He'd always been good at that. She sealed the letter, addressed it, and set it aside to post when the freight wagon left, without her on it. The decision should have felt weightier, more dramatic. Instead, it just felt right. Cole returned 6 days after he'd left, looking exhausted and trail-worn. Eleanor was leaving the schoolhouse when she saw him ride in, and something in her chest loosened at the sight of him. She walked toward the livery stable where he was dismounting. He saw her coming and waited, one hand on his horse's neck. "You're still here," he said. "Where else would I be?" "Thornton Springs. Lucy said the freight wagon came through." "It did." "And?" "And I chose to stay." Eleanor stopped a few feet away from him, suddenly nervous. "Is that all right with you?" Cole's expression did something complicated. "It's dangerous. Dalton's not going to stop coming after you." "I know. You could still leave, catch the next wagon out." "I could, but I won't." Eleanor lifted her chin. "I told you I was done running. I meant it. Even if it means—" Cole stopped, started again. "Eleanor, I can't guarantee I can keep you safe. I'm not asking you to guarantee anything. I'm just asking you to try." They stood in the dusty street, neither moving, until Cole finally closed the distance between them. He was close enough now that Eleanor could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the worry lines that had no business being on such a young face. "I found out what Dalton wants," Cole said quietly. "The stagecoach was carrying payroll, $20,000. The driver, Thompson, he was in on it, was supposed to hand it over, but something went wrong. They killed him anyway. The money's gone. Dalton thinks you know where it went." Eleanor's mind reeled. "I don't know anything about any money. I never saw—" "I know, but Dalton doesn't believe that. He thinks Thompson might have told you something before he died. Might have hidden it somewhere you'd find it." Cole ran a hand through his hair. "He's not going to stop until he's convinced you don't have it. And convincing men like Dalton usually involves things I don't want to think about." The implication made Eleanor's stomach turn. "What do we do?" "We prove you don't have it, publicly. In a way he can't ignore." Cole's voice was grim. "And hope he believes us." "How?" "I'm working on it." Eleanor wanted to push, to demand a real plan, but the look on Cole's face stopped her. He was barely standing, swaying slightly with exhaustion. "When's the last time you slept?" she asked. "Couple days ago, maybe." 8? "Don't remember." Eleanor made a decision. "Come on." "Where?" "Sarah's. You're going to eat something and sleep somewhere that isn't the ground." Cole started to protest, but Eleanor cut him off. "Don't argue with me, Mr. Mercer. You're no good to anyone dead on your feet." He followed her to the saloon, too tired to fight. Sarah took one look at him and pointed upstairs. "Guest room, second door. Don't bleed on the sheets." Cole managed a tired smile. "Yes, ma'am." Eleanor followed him upstairs, partly to make sure he actually made it to the room, partly because she wasn't ready to let him out of her sight yet. He dropped his saddlebags on the floor and sat heavily on the bed. "I shouldn't stay here. People will talk." "People are already talking. Let them." Eleanor moved to leave, then paused at the door. "Cole?" He looked up at her, those pale eyes bloodshot and exhausted. "Thank you," she said, "for everything, for caring when you didn't have to." "I had to," Cole said quietly. "Couldn't have stopped if I wanted to." The confession hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning Eleanor wasn't ready to examine. She left before either of them could say something they couldn't take back. But as she closed the door, she heard him whisper, "Stay safe, Eleanor." And she realized, with a jolt that felt like falling, that somewhere between the desert and this dying town, between fear and defiance, she'd started to fall for a cowboy 11 years younger than her, who would probably get himself killed trying to protect her. It was the worst possible timing, the worst possible choice. It was also the most honest thing she'd felt in years. Eleanor didn't sleep that night. She lay in her narrow bed above the saloon, listening to the muffled sounds of conversation and piano music below, and thought about all the ways this could end badly. Dalton would come. That was certain. Men like him didn't let loose ends stay loose, and $20,000 was enough money to make patience irrelevant. The only question was when and how violent he'd be when he arrived. She thought about leaving again. Really thought about it this time, mapping out the route to Tucson, calculating how long her savings would last, imagining herself somewhere safe and boring where nobody wanted her dead. The fantasy lasted maybe 5 minutes before it collapsed under its own weight. She couldn't leave the children, couldn't abandon the school they'd built together, couldn't walk away from the first place in over a year that had felt like home. Couldn't leave Cole. That last one was the hardest to admit. Eleanor had spent her entire adult life making careful, rational decisions. Marrying Richard had been rational. He'd had prospects, family connections, all the right credentials. Look how that had turned out. Nothing about staying in Broken Creek was rational. Nothing about caring for a 24-year-old drifter made sense. But sense seemed less important than it used to. Morning came gray and cold. Eleanor dressed quickly, braided her hair with hands that still shook slightly when she thought too hard about armed men and missing payroll. She found Sarah already awake in the kitchen, frying eggs and muttering curses at the stove. "Coffee's ready," Sarah said without turning around. "You look like hell." "Thank you. That's exactly what every woman wants to hear." "I don't deal in flattery. You want flattery? Find yourself a man who lies better." Sarah slid eggs onto 2 plates, handed one to Eleanor. "Cole's still asleep. First time I've seen him sleep past dawn in months." Eleanor sat at the small table, picked at her eggs. He was exhausted. He was more than exhausted. He was scared. Sarah poured coffee, sat across from her. "I've known Cole for 3 years. Seen him face down drunk miners, break wild horses, shoot his way out of situations that should have killed him. Never seen him scared before. He's worried about Dalton. He's worried about you." Sarah's gaze was sharp. "And you're worried about him. This is either going to end very well or very badly, Eleanor. No middle ground." "I know." "Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you're a 35-year-old school teacher falling for a kid who doesn't know how to stay in one place for more than a season. That's a recipe for heartbreak, no matter how you slice it." Eleanor set down her fork. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I like you, and I like Cole, and I don't want to watch both of you destroy yourselves over something that can't work." "You don't know it can't work." "Don't I?" Sarah leaned back in her chair. "Cole's been running since he was 16. His whole family died. Fever took his parents and 2 sisters in the span of a week. He was the only one who survived. You think a man carries that kind of loss and learns how to put down roots?" Eleanor's chest tightened. Cole had never mentioned his family, had deflected every personal question with practiced ease. Now she understood why. "People can change," she said quietly. "They can. Doesn't mean they will." Sarah softened slightly. "I'm not saying don't care about him. I'm saying be careful. Know what you're getting into." "It's too late for careful." "Yeah, I figured." They finished breakfast in silence. Eleanor helped wash the dishes, then headed to the schoolhouse. The morning was cold enough that she could see her breath, and the sky threatened rain. Rare for this part of Arizona, but not unheard of in late autumn. The children trickled in slowly, subdued by the weather. Eleanor led them through reading exercises, corrected arithmetic problems, and tried not to think about Cole sleeping upstairs at the saloon, or the men who wanted her dead, or the decision that loomed larger with every passing day. At noon, Cole appeared in the schoolhouse doorway. He looked better, rested, clean-shaven, steadier on his feet. The children noticed him immediately, abandoning their lessons to crowd around with questions. "Did you find the bad men? Are you going to shoot them? Can I see your gun? Absolutely not, Eleanor said sharply. Back to your seats, all of you. They obeyed with varying degrees of reluctance. Cole caught her eye, something apologetic in his expression. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. You're not interrupting. We were just finishing. Eleanor turned to the children. Read chapters 3 and 4 tonight. There will be questions tomorrow. The collective groan was immediate and satisfying. She dismissed them, and they filed out past Cole. Still firing questions, he deflected with practiced patience. When they were alone, Cole moved into the room properly, hands shoved in his pockets. Thank you for last night. I needed that. You're welcome. Eleanor busied herself straightening papers on her desk. Sarah told me about your family. I'm sorry. Cole's expression shuddered. She shouldn't have said anything. Maybe not, but I'm still sorry. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, it was 8 years ago. Should be over it by now. Loss doesn't work that way. No. Cole picked up a piece of chalk, turned it over in his fingers. It doesn't. Eleanor wanted to push, to ask questions, to understand the man who'd saved her life and somehow become essential to her continued existence. But the tight set of his shoulders warned her off. Did you come up with a plan? She asked instead. For Dalton? Working on it. He set down the chalk. There's a man in Tucson who might be able to help. Name's Harrison. He knows Dalton, knows how he operates. If anyone can convince Dalton you don't have his money, it's Harrison. And if he can't, then we have bigger problems. Eleanor crossed her arms. I'm tired of running from bigger problems, Cole. I know, but sometimes running is the smart play. And sometimes it's just cowardice dressed up as wisdom. Cole's mouth quirked. You're getting cynical. I'm a bad influence. You're a terrible influence. I started smoking, I carry a gun, and I say things to my students that would have gotten me fired in Philadelphia. Sounds like an improvement to me. Eleanor laughed despite herself. You would think that. They stood in the quiet schoolhouse, dust motes drifting through afternoon light, and Eleanor felt the weight of everything unsaid pressing down between them. The attraction that neither of them acknowledged, the fear that bound them together, the impossible future that couldn't exist but refused to disappear. Cole cleared his throat. I should go. Let you finish up here. Wait. Eleanor didn't know what made her say it, didn't know what she wanted him to wait for. But he stopped anyway, turned back to her with those pale eyes that saw too much. What happens after? She asked. After Dalton, after this is over. What happens then? I don't know. Will you leave? Move on to the next town? Cole looked away. Probably. And if I asked you not to? The question hung between them, dangerous and raw. Cole's jaw worked like he was chewing on words too complicated to spit out. Don't ask that, he said finally. Don't ask me to be something I'm not. I'm not asking you to be anything. I'm asking you to stay. It's the same thing, Eleanor. Staying means putting down roots, building something permanent. I don't know how to do that without it turning into a grave. The honesty of it hurt. Eleanor understood now. Sarah had been right. Cole wasn't just running from town to town. He was running from the possibility of loss, from caring about anything enough that its absence would destroy him. So that's it? Eleanor heard the bitterness in her voice but couldn't stop it. You saved my life. You sleep in the room next to mine. You look at me like... She stopped. Started again. You make me care about you and then you're just going to leave? I never asked you to care. No, you just made it impossible not to. Cole's expression cracked, something painful showing through. Eleanor, forget it. She turned away, gathering papers she didn't need to gather. Go to Tucson. Talk to your contact. Do whatever you need to do. I'll be fine here. You won't be fine. Dalton is your problem to solve, apparently, so solve it. Eleanor kept her back to him, afraid of what her face might reveal. I have papers to grade. She heard him stand there for another moment, heard the weight of things he wasn't saying. Then his footsteps retreated, and the door closed quietly behind him. Eleanor sat down hard in her chair and pressed her hands to her face. She'd known this would happen, had known from the moment she realized she was falling for him that it would end exactly like this, with Cole running and Eleanor left behind to pick up the pieces. The smart thing would be to protect herself now. Pull back. Stop caring before it got worse. But Eleanor had never been particularly smart when it came to matters of the heart. If she had been, she never would have married Richard in the first place. Rain started that afternoon, a cold drizzle that turned the streets to mud and kept most of the town indoors. Eleanor stayed late at the schoolhouse, grateful for the solitude, working by lamplight until her eyes burned. She was locking up when Jim Holloway appeared, collar turned up against the rain. "Miss Vance?" "Yes, glad I caught you." He looked uncomfortable. "There's talk around town about you and Cole." Eleanor's stomach sank. What kind of talk? The usual kind. People notice things, notice how much time he spends making sure you're safe, notice how you look at each other. Jim shifted his weight. "I'm not judging, just thought you should know." "Thank you for the warning." "It's more than a warning." Jim's voice softened. "Eleanor, I know it's none of my business, but you're building something good here. The school, the children, your reputation. Cole's a good man, but he's also young and rootless, and the kind of person who brings trouble without meaning to. Just be careful. That's all I'm saying." Eleanor wanted to be angry at the presumption, at everyone's concern for her reputation and her future. But Jim's face held only kindness. "I appreciate your concern," she said carefully, "but I'm old enough to make my own mistakes." "Fair enough. Just hate to see you hurt. You..." After he left, Eleanor walked back to the saloon through rain that had turned serious, soaking through her shawl and chilling her to the bone. She found Sarah behind the bar, serving drinks to the handful of men willing to brave the weather. "Cole left," Sarah said without preamble. "About an hour ago. Said he'd be back in 3 days. He told me he was going." He looked miserable about it. "Good. He should be." Sarah's eyebrow rose. "You two have a fight?" "Something like that." Eleanor shook water from her shawl. "Can I get some of that whiskey you gave me?" "That bad, huh?" "Worse." Sarah poured 2 glasses, slid one across the bar to Eleanor. "What happened?" "I asked him to stay. After everything settled with Dalton. He said no." "He say why?" "Something about not knowing how to build permanent things without them turning into graves." Eleanor took a drink, winced at the burn. He lost his family. Everyone. "I understand why he's scared, but you're tired of people being scared when you're the one actually in danger," Sarah finished. "Yeah, I get that." They drank in silence for a moment. Around them, the saloon hummed with quiet conversation, the clink of glasses, the drum of rain on the roof. "You love him?" Sarah asked. Eleanor opened her mouth to deny it. The truth came out instead. "I think I might. That's unfortunate." "Tell me about it." "What are you going to do?" "I don't know. Stay here. Teach. Try not to get killed by outlaws or die of a broken heart." Eleanor laughed, but it came out hollow. "The usual." Sarah refilled both glasses. "For what it's worth, I think he loves you too. He's just too stubborn and scared to admit it. Doesn't change anything. Maybe not, but it's worth knowing." The rain continued through the night and into the next day. Eleanor taught in a cold classroom, wrapped in her shawl, while children shivered at their desks and complained about the weather. She sent them home early, unable to concentrate herself. That night, she lay awake listening to the rain and thinking about Cole somewhere on the road to Tucson, thinking about the look on his face when she'd asked him to stay. The way his expression had cracked open, showing all the fear and longing he worked so hard to hide. She thought about Richard too, for the first time in weeks, remembered the scandal that had driven her from Philadelphia, his affair with her best friend, the whispered conversations that stopped when Eleanor entered a room, the pitying looks from women who'd once envied her marriage. She'd thought that was heartbreak, had thought nothing could hurt worse than public humiliation and private betrayal. She'd been wrong. This hurt worse, because Richard had been a mistake from the beginning, a choice made for the wrong reasons. Cole was different. Cole was real in a way Richard had never been, and losing something real was infinitely more painful than losing a comfortable lie. The second day of rain brought flooding to the low parts of town. The mine entrance, already unstable, partially collapsed. No one was hurt, but it was another nail in Broken Creek's coffin. Eleanor heard people talking about leaving, about trying their luck in California or heading back east. She wondered if she should join them, cut her losses, start over somewhere that wasn't dying by inches. But she'd put too much of herself into this place, into the school, into the children, into whatever fragile thing had been building between her and Cole before fear tore it apart. On the third day, the rain stopped. The sun emerged pale and tentative, turning puddles into mirrors and making the desert steam. Eleanor opened the schoolhouse windows to air out the damp smell, assigned reading to her students, and tried not to watch the street for a buckskin horse. Cole didn't return that day, or the next. By the fifth day, Eleanor had moved from worry to anger and back to worry again. Sarah assured her this was normal. Cole often got delayed, often took longer than expected. But Eleanor heard the doubt underneath the reassurance. On the sixth day, a rider came into town at full gallop, shouting for the marshal. Eleanor was teaching when she heard the commotion, saw people running toward the marshal's office. She dismissed class early and followed. A crowd had gathered. Eleanor pushed through to find Marshal Hastings, looking more sober than usual, questioning a young man covered in dust and what looked like dried blood. "Ambushed on the Tucson Road," the man was saying. "6 of them, maybe more. They took the wagon, killed the driver. I barely got away." "When?" Hastings demanded. 3 days ago. I've been hiding in the rocks, waiting for them to clear out." 3 days ago. Right when Cole would have been on that road. Eleanor's blood went cold. She grabbed Sarah's arm. "Cole." "We don't know," Sarah said quietly. "Could have missed the ambush entirely. Could have gone a different route." But they both knew Cole wouldn't have gone a different route. He would have seen the ambush, seen someone in danger, and ridden straight into it, because that's what Cole did. Eleanor pushed forward. "Excuse me, the men who attacked you, did you see them clearly?" The young man turned to her, eyes still wild with fear. "Some of them. Why?" "Was there a man on a buckskin horse, mid-20s, pale eyes, wearing—" "Eleanor, don't," Sarah warned, but the young man was nodding. Yeah, there was someone like that. He came out of nowhere, started shooting, gave me a chance to run. I don't know what happened to him after. I just ran." The world tilted. Eleanor felt Sarah's hand on her elbow, steadying her. "We need to organize a search party," she heard herself say. "If he's wounded—" "Miss Vance, with all respect, that's not your decision to make," Hastings said. His voice was kind but firm. "The road to Tucson is dangerous territory. I can't ask men to risk their lives on a maybe." "Then I'll go myself." "No, you won't." Sarah's grip tightened. "That's exactly what Dalton would want. You out in the open, separated from protection." "I don't care what Dalton wants. Cole is out there because of me, because he was trying to help me. I can't just—" Eleanor's voice cracked. "I can't just do nothing." Jim Holloway stepped forward from the crowd. "I'll go. Take a couple men who know the territory. We'll search the area, see what we can find." "I'm coming with you," Eleanor said. "No, you're not." Jim's tone left no room for argument. "You're staying here where it's safe. That's what Cole would want." "Cole doesn't get to decide what I do anymore." "Maybe not. But I do, and I say you're staying." Jim looked at Hastings. "Give me 2 men and we'll leave within the hour." Hastings nodded. "Take Robertson and Chen. They're good in a fight if it comes to that." The search party assembled quickly. Eleanor watched them ride out with a sick feeling in her stomach. Sarah guided her back to the saloon, poured her whiskey she didn't drink, and sat with her in silence that felt like vigil. Hours passed. The sun moved across the sky. Children came to the schoolhouse and found it locked, Eleanor unable to pretend she could teach. She sat in Sarah's kitchen instead, hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee, staring at nothing. "He's probably fine," Sarah said for the dozenth time. "Cole's survived worse." "You don't know that." "I know he's tough. Know he's smart. Know he doesn't go down easy." "Everyone goes down eventually." Sarah didn't argue with that. Evening was falling when they heard horses returning. Eleanor was out the door before Sarah could stop her, running toward the small group riding up the main street. Jim was in the lead. Behind him, 2 men supported a third rider between them. Cole. Eleanor's heart stopped, restarted, tried to climb out of her chest. He was alive. bloodied and slumped in the saddle, but alive. She reached them as they were helping him down. Up close she could see the damage, a gash across his temple, his shirt dark with blood, his left arm hanging wrong. Found him about 5 miles out, Jim said. He'd crawled into a gully. Been there at least 2 days, maybe more. Cole's eyes found Eleanor's, struggled to focus. You're okay. I'm fine. You're the one... Her voice failed. She reached for him, then stopped, afraid to hurt him worse. Let's get him to the doctor. No doctor in Broken Creek, Sarah said, appearing at Eleanor's shoulder. Closest one's in Thornton Springs. We'll have to make do. They carried Cole upstairs to the same room he'd slept in before. Sarah took charge immediately, barking orders for hot water, clean cloth, whiskey for the wound, and more whiskey for the patient. Eleanor hovered uselessly until Sarah shoved a basin of water into her hands. Make yourself useful. Clean the blood off so we can see how bad it is. She worked carefully, washing away dried blood and desert dirt with hands that trembled. The head wound wasn't as bad as it looked. Scalp wounds always bled dramatically. But his arm was another story. Broken, definitely. Maybe in more than one place. Cole drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes lucid, sometimes rambling. At one point, he grabbed Eleanor's wrist, eyes fever bright. Dalton knows, he said, knows you don't have the money. Harrison confirmed it, sent word. Should be safe now. Shh. Don't talk. Need to tell you, need you to know. His grip tightened. I should have stayed, should have said yes. I was scared and stupid and... Cole, stop. Rest. We can talk about this later. Later might not come. It will. You're too stubborn to die. He laughed, then gasped at the pain it caused. You're probably right. Sarah set his arm with efficiency that made Eleanor wince in sympathy. Cole passed out halfway through, which was probably a mercy. They bandaged his ribs, cracked but not broken, and stitched the gash on his head. When they finished, he looked smaller somehow, younger, vulnerable in a way Eleanor had never seen him. He'll be all right, Sarah said quietly. Might take a few weeks, but he's young. He'll heal. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Someone needs to sit with him tonight. Make sure the fever doesn't get too high. Sarah looked at Eleanor. You want the job? Yes. Thought you might. Sarah left, closing the door softly behind her. Eleanor pulled a chair close to the bed, sat down, and prepared to wait. Cole's fever spiked around midnight. Eleanor sponged his face and neck with cool water, whispered meaningless reassurances when he thrashed. He called out names she didn't recognize, his sisters probably, his parents, people he'd lost. Near dawn, the fever broke. Cole's eyes opened, clearer than they'd been, and found Eleanor still sitting beside him. You stayed, he said, voice rough. Of course I stayed. Even though I'm stubborn and scared and a terrible bet for any kind of future? Especially because of that. Eleanor took his good hand, squeezed gently. Cole, what you said before about not being able to stay, I meant it, but I was wrong too. He struggled to sit up. Eleanor helped him, adjusting pillows behind his back. I've been running for 8 years. Thought I was protecting myself. But watching you these past weeks, seeing you choose to stay when leaving would have been easier. I realized running isn't protection. It's just another kind of dying. Eleanor's throat tightened. What are you saying? I'm saying I don't know if I can be what you need. Don't know if I can stay in one place without feeling like I'm suffocating. But I want to try. His pale eyes held hers. If you'll let me. Cole, you don't have to answer now. I know it's complicated. The age thing, the reputation thing, all of it. I just needed you to know. In case Dalton comes back. In case this goes bad. I needed you to know I would have stayed. For you. Eleanor leaned forward, pressed her forehead to his. It's not going to go bad. Dalton knows I don't have his money. He'll leave us alone. Maybe. Definitely. They stayed like that, breathing the same air, until the sun rose and morning light spilled through the window. Until Eleanor realized that somewhere between the desert and this dying town, between fear and defiance, she'd found something worth fighting for. She just had to hope it was enough. Hope turned out to be a fragile thing. For 3 days after Cole's return, Broken Creek held its breath. Eleanor taught her classes with Sarah's pistol tucked in her desk drawer. Jim Holloway organized watches, men taking shifts walking the perimeter of town, watching the roads. Even Marshal Hastings stayed sober, which everyone agreed was either a good sign or a terrible one. Cole healed slowly, frustrated by his broken arm and cracked ribs. Eleanor visited him twice a day, bringing food he barely touched and books he pretended to read. They talked carefully around what he'd said that dawn morning, both of them aware that words spoken in fever light didn't always survive the harsh reality of day. On the 4th day, a lone rider appeared on the eastern road. Eleanor was dismissing her students when Lucy ran in, breathless. "Miss Vance, there's a man coming, fancy dressed, riding alone." Eleanor's stomach dropped. She grabbed the pistol from her desk, checked that it was loaded even though she'd checked it that morning. "Go home, Lucy. Now. Tell the others to stay inside. But now." Lucy ran. Eleanor stood in the doorway of the schoolhouse, watching the rider approach. He was indeed fancy dressed, suit and vest despite the dust, a hat that cost more than most people in Broken Creek earned in a month. He rode with the confidence of a man who'd never been told no. The rider stopped in the middle of the street, surveying the town with obvious distaste. His gaze found Eleanor and held. "Miss Vance, I presume?" His voice was cultured, Eastern, not what she'd expected from an outlaw. "And you are?" "Marcus Dalton." He dismounted smoothly, tied his horse to the rail outside the general store. "I believe we have business to discuss." Eleanor kept the pistol visible, but not pointed. "I don't have your money." "So I've been informed. My associate, Mr. Harrison, was quite convincing on that point." Dalton brushed dust from his sleeve. "Still, I felt it prudent to verify personally. You understand?" "I understand you sent men to kill me." "A regrettable misunderstanding. My men exceeded their authority." He smiled, and Eleanor saw the predator beneath the polish. "I've since corrected that issue." The way he said corrected made Eleanor's skin crawl. Behind her, she heard footsteps. Cole appeared at her shoulder, moving stiffly but upright. His gun was already drawn. "Dalton," he said flatly. "Mr. Mercer, you're looking worse for wear." Dalton's gaze flicked to Cole's splinted arm. "My men reported you killed 3 of theirs before they brought you down. Impressive, if ultimately futile." "They didn't bring me down. I rode away. After bleeding half to death. I call that a draw at best." Dalton's attention shifted back to Eleanor. "I'm not here for violence, Miss Vance. I'm here for answers. The stagecoach driver, Thompson, where did he hide the payroll?" "I don't know. I never spoke to him beyond basic pleasantries." "Never? Not once during the attack?" "I was hiding behind the overturned coach. He was dying 20 feet away. We weren't exactly chatting." Dalton studied her face like he was reading a text. Eleanor forced herself to meet his gaze, to show nothing but truth. After a long moment, he nodded. "I believe you. Which presents me with a problem." He turned in a slow circle, taking in the shabby buildings, the watching faces and windows. "The money is somewhere. Thompson wouldn't have risked double-crossing me without securing it first. If you don't have it, and my men didn't find it at the crash site, then it's still out there. Then I suggest you keep looking, but leave Broken Creek out of it." "Oh, I intend to leave your charming hamlet alone. You have my word." Dalton's smile returned, sharp and humorless. "But understand, Miss Vance, if that money surfaces, if I find out you knew where it was all along, I will return. And Mr. Mercer won't be able to protect you a second time." "If you're done threatening people, you can leave," Cole said. His voice was steady, but Eleanor saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his finger rested on the trigger. "I'm done. For now." Dalton mounted his horse with practiced ease. "A word of advice, Miss Vance. You've chosen a hard life in a dying town with a man who doesn't know how to stay put. I respect the boldness of it, but boldness doesn't keep you warm in winter or fed when the mines finally give out. Might want to reconsider your choices." "My choices are none of your concern." "Fair enough." Dalton tipped his hat, the gesture mocking. "Good luck to you both. You'll need it." He rode out the way he'd come, disappearing into the desert heat haze. Eleanor didn't lower the pistol until he was completely out of sight. "You okay?" Cole asked. Eleanor's hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped the gun. No, not really. Cole took the pistol from her, set it aside, then pulled her against him with his good arm. Eleanor let herself lean into his warmth, breathing hard against the fear that had been coiled tight in her chest for weeks. It's over, Cole said quietly. He believed you. He's not coming back. You can't know that. I know men like Dalton. He won't waste resources on a maybe. He'll move on to easier targets. Cole's chin rested on top of her head. It's over, Eleanor. She wanted to believe him, chose to believe him, because the alternative, living in constant fear, always looking over her shoulder, would destroy her more surely than any outlaw. That night, Sarah threw what she called a celebration, and everyone else called an excuse to drink. The saloon filled with townspeople relieved that Dalton had come and gone without violence. Eleanor sat in a corner with Cole, watching the festivities with detached amusement. You should be happy, Cole said. You're safe. Dalton's gone. The school's thriving. I am happy. I'm just tired. Fair. He shifted in his chair, wincing slightly. Eleanor, about what I said. Cole, you don't have to. Let me finish. He took her hand, the gesture surprisingly gentle. I meant what I said, about wanting to try, to stay. I know I'm not good at it. No, I'll probably mess it up, but I want to try anyway. Eleanor's throat tightened. Why? Because you asked me to. Because watching you these past months, the way you chose this place, chose to stay when leaving would have been easier, it made me realize running isn't living. It's just surviving, and I'm tired of just surviving. What about your fear? About losing people you care about? Still there, probably always will be. Cole's thumb traced circles on her palm. But I'm more scared of losing you by walking away than I am of staying and risking it. Eleanor blinked back tears she refused to shed in public. You're 11 years younger than me. People already talk. If this becomes something real, let them talk. I don't care. You say that now. I'll say it in 6 months too. A year. However long it takes you to believe me. Cole leaned closer, his voice dropping. I'm not Richard. I'm not going to wake up one day and decide you're not enough. You're the most enough person I've ever met. The compliment landed awkwardly, sincerely, perfectly. Eleanor laughed despite the tears now tracking down her face. That's not even grammatically correct. Good thing you're a teacher. You can fix my grammar while I fix everything else I'm terrible at. That's going to take a while. Good thing I'm staying then. They sat in the noisy saloon, hands linked, and Eleanor felt something settle in her chest. Not certainty. She was too old and too scarred to believe in certainty anymore. But possibility. The kind that came from choosing to risk everything on something that might fail, but could also be extraordinary. The next morning, Eleanor woke to find Cole already up and dressed, moving carefully around Sarah's kitchen with his good arm. What are you doing? She asked. Making coffee. Badly. He gestured at the pot, which was indeed producing something that smelled more like tar than coffee. How do you make this not terrible? You start by using less grounds and adding water. Eleanor took over, shooing him toward the table. Sit. You're going to hurt yourself. I'm fine. You have a broken arm and cracked ribs. You're not fine. Cole sat, but only because arguing with Eleanor when she was in teacher mode was futile. I need to start pulling my weight around here. Can't live off Sarah's charity forever. Sarah doesn't mind. I do. He watched Eleanor work, something soft in his expression. I've been thinking about what I could do here, how I could make myself useful. Besides getting shot protecting people? Besides that. Cole's mouth quirked. There's talk of trying to restart the mine. Just a small operation, enough to keep the town going, not the full-scale thing they had before. Jim Holloway thinks there's still copper worth pulling out. And they need someone to manage the labor, organize shifts, handle safety protocols, deal with the day-to-day. He paused. Jim offered me the job. Eleanor turned to stare at him. That's a permanent position. I know. Cole, you can't just, you have to be sure. If you take a job like that and then leave in 3 months, I'm not going to leave in 3 months. His voice was firm. I'm done leaving, Eleanor. I told you that. She wanted to believe him, needed to believe him. But trust was harder than love, and Eleanor's trust had been shattered too many times. What if it doesn't work? She asked quietly. What if you wake up one day and realize you made a mistake, that staying was wrong? Then I'll deal with it, but I won't run. Cole stood, crossed to her, took her hands despite the awkwardness of his splint. I'm asking you to have faith in me. I know I haven't earned it yet. I know I'm young and stupid, and I've given you every reason to doubt. But I'm asking anyway. Eleanor looked at their joined hands, hers pale and ink-stained from grading papers, his scarred and calloused from years of hard living. Mismatched, improbable, somehow right. Okay, she said. Okay? Okay, I'll have faith in you, but Cole, if you break my heart, I'm keeping the pistol Sarah gave me, and I'm learning how to use it properly. He laughed, the sound bright and genuine. Deal. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm Eleanor hadn't expected. Cole took the mining job and threw himself into it with surprising dedication. Eleanor taught her growing class of students. Word had spread to neighboring homesteads, and she now had 32 children ranging from 6 to 16. The schoolhouse they'd built was barely big enough. They talked about expansion, about making Broken Creek into something more than a dying mining town. Jim had ideas about diversifying, bringing in cattle, establishing trade routes with Tucson, maybe even getting the telegraph company to reconsider. It's a long shot, he admitted one evening over dinner at Sarah's. But stranger things have happened. We're proof of that, Sarah said, gesturing at Eleanor and Cole sitting side by side. School teacher and cowboy. Never thought I'd see it. Technically, I'm mine management now, Cole said. You're still a cowboy, just one with a steady paycheck. The town began to shift, slowly, grudgingly, but unmistakably. A few families who'd been planning to leave decided to stay. A merchant from Tucson opened a small dry goods store. Someone started talking about building a proper church, though that project stalled when they couldn't agree on denomination. Eleanor's reputation as a teacher spread. She received a letter from Thornton Springs. They'd heard she was doing good work in Broken Creek and wanted to know if she'd be interested in training teachers for other frontier schools. The pay was modest, but the opportunity was real. She showed the letter to Cole that night, sitting on the porch of the small house they'd started renting. Separate bedrooms, because Eleanor's reputation could only withstand so much scandal, but a shared space that felt like home. You should do it, he said after reading. It would mean traveling, a few weeks at a time. I know. You'd be okay with that? Cole looked at her in the fading light. Eleanor, I'm not going to be the kind of man who holds you back from opportunities because I'm insecure. If you want to train teachers, train teachers. I'll be here when you get back. Promise? Promise. Eleanor folded the letter carefully, set it aside. I'll think about it. That means yes. That means I'll think about it. But she was smiling. Winter came early that year, bringing cold that penetrated the thin walls of their house and made morning classes an exercise in willpower. Eleanor bought warmer clothes for the children who couldn't afford them, spending her savings without hesitation. Cole chopped firewood with his good arm until the pile outside their door was taller than he was. They celebrated Christmas quietly, a small tree Cole cut from higher elevation, decorations the children made in class, dinner with Sarah and Jim and Mrs. Chen. It was nothing like the elaborate Philadelphia Christmases Eleanor remembered, with their formal dinners and expensive gifts and underlying tension. It was better. On New Year's Eve, Cole found Eleanor sitting on their porch, wrapped in blankets against the cold, watching stars that seemed close enough to touch. Thinking about the year? He asked, sitting beside her. Thinking about everything. Eleanor leaned against his shoulder. A year ago, I was in Philadelphia, married, miserable, planning an escape I wasn't sure I'd have the courage to follow through on. And now? Now I'm in a dying mining town in the middle of nowhere with a man 11 years younger than me who I'm probably falling in love with. She paused. It's completely insane. Completely, Cole agreed. You want to go back to how things were? Not for anything. He kissed her then, slow and careful, and Eleanor let herself sink into it. Let herself believe that this could work. That age and circumstance and all the reasonable objections didn't matter as much as the fact that Cole looked at her like she hung the stars, and she looked at him like he'd saved her life. Because he had, just not the way either of them had expected. Spring brought the real test. Eleanor's first teaching trip took her to a settlement 3 days' ride north. She'd be gone 2 weeks, training a young woman who wanted to start a school but had no formal education herself. Cole helped her pack, double-checked her supplies, and tried not to look worried. "I'll be fine," Eleanor said for the dozenth time. "I know." "Then stop hovering." "I'm not hovering. I'm being attentive." "You're being nervous." Cole ran a hand through his hair. 2 weeks is a long time. "It's 2 weeks. You'll barely notice I'm gone." "I'll notice." He caught her hand, pulled her close. "Come back safe." "Always." The 2 weeks apart were harder than Eleanor expected. She missed Cole with an intensity that surprised her, missed his quiet presence, his dry humor, the way he listened when she talked about her students. She threw herself into teaching, into helping the young woman, Mary, develop lesson plans and classroom management skills. Mary was grateful, eager, completely overwhelmed. "I don't know if I can do this," she admitted one evening. "You can," Eleanor said firmly. "I felt the same way when I started in Broken Creek. Still feel that way some days, but you push through. The children need you." "What if I fail?" "Then you fail, and you try again. That's all any of us can do." When Eleanor finally returned to Broken Creek, road-weary and exhausted, she found Cole waiting at the edge of town. He'd clearly been watching for her, probably for hours. "You're early," he said, helping her down from the wagon. "I missed home." "Home or me?" "Both. Mostly you." Eleanor kissed him, not caring who saw. "How was the mine?" "Still standing. Nobody died. I call that success." He grabbed her bag, slung it over his shoulder. "The children made you a welcome back banner. It's hanging in the schoolhouse." "They did?" "Lucy organized it. It's crooked and misspelled, but they were very proud." Eleanor's eyes stung with unexpected tears. "I love them." "They love you too. So do most of the adults. You've become kind of essential around here." "Is that your way of saying you missed me?" "That's my way of saying I'm grateful you came back." They walked through town together, and Eleanor noticed changes. A new sign on the general store, repairs to the marshal's office. The church construction had resumed, the frame now complete. "Town's growing," she said. "Little bit. Jim's trade route plan is working. We're getting regular shipments from Tucson now. A couple of families moved in last month." Cole glanced at her. "It's not Philadelphia, never will be, but it's something." "It's enough." That night, sitting in their small house with a fire crackling against the spring chill, Eleanor realized she'd stopped thinking of this as temporary, stopped planning her exit strategy. Somewhere between the desert and this moment, Broken Creek had stopped being a refuge and started being home. The realization should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like relief. "Cole?" she said quietly. "Yeah? I'm glad you stayed." "Me too. Even though it's hard sometimes? Even though you still miss the freedom of drifting?" Cole was quiet for a moment. "I won't lie. Some days I feel the pull. See a rider heading out and wonder what it would be like to follow. But then I come home to you, to this, and I remember why I chose to stay. The freedom to drift isn't worth the loneliness of never having something worth staying for." Eleanor moved closer, tucked herself against his side. "What if I asked you something?" "Depends what you're asking." "Would you marry me?" Cole went very still. "What?" "You heard me." Eleanor's heart pounded, but she forced herself to continue. "I know it's unconventional. I know I'm supposed to wait for you to ask. But I'm 36 years old and I've already done conventional. It didn't work out well. So I'm asking, Cole Mercer, would you marry me?" "Eleanor, if the answer is no, that's fine. We can keep going the way we are. I want you to know I'm all in. Whatever this is, I'm choosing it, choosing you. And if marriage is something you want..." Cole kissed her, cutting off the nervous rambling. When he pulled back, he was smiling. "Yes." "Yes?" Yes, I'll marry you. On one condition. Eleanor's stomach flipped. What condition? We do it properly. Not some rushed thing because you're worried I'll change my mind. A real wedding with the whole town. Give people something to celebrate besides the mine not collapsing. Cole, that's... Are you sure? People will talk. About our ages, about... Let them talk. I'm marrying the woman I love. If they have a problem with that, they can take it up with Sarah. She'll set them straight. Eleanor laughed through tears she didn't remember starting to cry. This is insane. Completely. You want to call it off? Not for anything. They married in June, when the desert was hot, but not unbearable, and wildflowers bloomed in improbable colors among the rocks. Sarah organized everything with the efficiency of a general planning a campaign. Jim gave Eleanor away since her brother Thomas was too far east to make the journey. Lucy and the other children decorated the half-finished church with ribbons they'd made in class. Cole wore a borrowed suit that fit badly. Eleanor wore a simple dress she'd sewn herself, nothing like the elaborate gown she'd worn marrying Richard. This dress was practical, comfortable, real. The ceremony was short. Marshal Hastings, sober and surprisingly eloquent, officiated. When he got to the vows, Eleanor spoke clearly, meaning every word. I choose you, she said, looking at Cole. Not because you're perfect or because this is easy, but because you make me braver than I am alone. Because you stayed when you could have run. Because loving you feels like coming home. Cole's own vows were simpler. I'm not good with words, but I'm good at staying, and I promise to keep choosing to stay every day for the rest of my life. When they kissed, the assembled crowd, most of Broken Creek and a few people from neighboring settlements, cheered loud enough to scare the horses tied up outside. The celebration lasted into the evening. Sarah's saloon provided food and drink. Someone produced a fiddle, and dancing broke out in the street. Children ran wild. Adults gossiped and laughed and toasted the unlikely couple. They're happy for you, Jim said, finding Eleanor during a break in the festivities. Surprised, some of them, but happy. Because they didn't think Cole would actually stay? Because they didn't think either of you would find what you were looking for out here. Jim raised his glass. To proving them wrong. To proving them wrong, Eleanor echoed. Late in the evening, when the party had mellowed to quiet conversation and the children had been carried home by patient parents, Eleanor and Cole stood together outside their small house. The desert stretched around them, dark and vast and beautiful in its harshness. No regrets? Cole asked. Not one. Eleanor leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. You? Just one. Her heart seized. What? Should have asked you to marry me months ago. Wasted a lot of time being scared. Eleanor relaxed, smiled. We got here eventually. Yeah, we did. They stood in comfortable silence, listening to the desert night sounds. Coyotes in the distance, wind through the scrub, the fading music from the saloon. Eleanor? Cole said quietly. Thank you. For what? For asking me to stay, for choosing this, for being stubborn enough to take a chance on something that didn't make sense on paper. He pulled her closer. For saving my life as much as I saved yours. Eleanor turned in his arms, looked up at the face she'd come to know, as well as her own. Young still, but weathered by the life he'd lived. Scarred, but healing. Home. We saved each other, she said. That's how this works. The years that followed brought challenges Eleanor and Cole faced together. The mine had good seasons and bad. Broken Creek grew slowly, never becoming the boomtown it had once been, but stabilizing into something sustainable. Eleanor's school expanded. They built a second room, hired another teacher to help with the growing enrollment. She traveled regularly to train teachers in other settlements, and Cole always waited for her return. He never drifted, never looked restlessly toward the horizon. Or if he did, he never mentioned it. They had their fights, about money, about his tendency to take dangerous jobs, about her habit of working herself to exhaustion. But they learned to fight fair, to apologize genuinely, to remember that they'd chosen this together. On their 5th anniversary, standing in the same spot where they'd married, Eleanor looked at the town they'd helped build and the life they'd created. You know what's funny? She said. What? I came out here running from something. From Richard, from the scandal, from a life that was suffocating me. And I thought the frontier would be my salvation, some fresh start where I could reinvent myself. And I was right, but not the way I expected. The frontier didn't give me a fresh start. It just stripped away everything that wasn't real, everything I'd built for the wrong reasons, left me standing in the dust with nothing but what I actually was. Cole's arm tightened around her waist. And what were you? Someone strong enough to start over. Someone brave enough to take a chance. Someone who could love again even after having her heart broken. Eleanor turned to look at him. Someone who could see past age and circumstance and social expectation to find something real. I'm glad you found me, Cole said quietly. I'm glad you found me first. There in the desert, when I had nothing and needed everything. You always had everything that mattered. You just didn't know it yet. Eleanor kissed him, long and slow and sweet, and thought about the woman she'd been 5 years ago, scared, running, convinced her best years were behind her. That woman would be shocked at where life had led, would probably be horrified at the choices Eleanor had made, would definitely disapprove of marrying a man 11 years younger in a dying desert town with no prospects and no guarantee of anything. Eleanor didn't care. That woman had been living someone else's life, following rules written by people who'd never risked anything real. This life, messy and imperfect and sometimes brutally hard, was entirely her own, built not from what she was running from, but what she was running toward. Love, purpose, belonging, home. The desert wind picked up, carrying the scent of dust and creosote and possibility. In the distance, children's voices drifted from the school. The mine whistle signaled the end of a shift. Life continued its imperfect, beautiful rhythm. Eleanor Vance Mercer, former Philadelphia socialite, disgraced wife, frontier teacher, beloved member of a dying town that refused to die, stood in the arms of the cowboy who'd saved her life and smiled at the future they were building together. It wasn't the life she'd planned. It wasn't the life anyone would have chosen for her. It was perfect anyway.